I'm begging you, hurry up. The rancher stepped closer and found a life worth saving. Ethan Cole woke up before the sun, as he had done for years. The old alarm clock beside his bed hadn't even rung yet, but his body was used to the rhythm of ranch life. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, stretching, and felt the familiar stiffness in his muscles. Ranch work was hard work, but it was honest, and he loved it. Living on the sprawling Montana ranch meant waking early, checking the fences, feeding the animals, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Every day was a small challenge, but that was the life he had chosen, and the life he was proud of. He dressed quickly in his worn jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and sturdy boots that had seen better days. The air in the house was cool and smelled faintly of wood smoke from the fireplace he had lit the night before. Outside, the world was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds waking to greet the morning. Ethan grabbed a cup of black coffee and stepped onto the porch, letting the peacefulness of the morning wash over him. The rolling hills stretched out as far as he could see, dotted with patches of green grass, clusters of trees, and the occasional grazing herd of cattle. For a moment he just stood there, listening. The silence of the countryside had a rhythm of its own, the soft sound of the wind through the trees, the faint lowing of cattle, and the occasional thump of a hoof against the ground. It was a comforting sound, one that reminded him of the life he had built from scratch. Ethan had grown up here, inherited the land from his father, and over the years had added his own touches, fixing fences, planting orchards, and caring for every animal as if it were part of the family. After finishing his coffee, he grabbed the keys to his truck and headed out toward the barn. The animals were his responsibility, and nothing could be left unattended. As he walked, he noticed the small things, the dew glistening on the grass, a family of rabbits darting through the bushes, and the way the sunlight started to warm the earth. Even these small moments felt important because they reminded him of the connection he had to this land. A connection that was more than just work. It was home. By the time he reached the barn, the sun had begun to rise over the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and gold. Ethan's horses were already awake, shifting in their stalls, snorting softly as they greeted him. He moved from stall to stall, checking their water and making sure their feed was fresh. The smell of hay filled his nostrils, comforting and familiar. After the horses, he made his way to the cows, counting them as he went. Everything seemed normal, just as it should be. Ethan enjoyed these mornings, the quiet before the day truly began. There was a rhythm to ranch life that felt safe and predictable, a rhythm that allowed him to think and reflect. But on this morning, as he finished checking the fences near the edge of the property, a strange feeling settled over him. It was faint at first, a small, uneasy sensation that something wasn't right. He paused, listening carefully. At first, there was only silence. The wind still whispered through the trees, and the cattle continued to graze. But then, faintly, he heard it. A voice, a small, frightened voice calling out from somewhere near the creek that ran along the far edge of the ranch. "Help! Please hurry!" it shouted. The words were desperate, panicked, and they made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He had lived on this land his entire life and knew every sound, every animal, every corner of the property. This voice was not one he recognized, and the urgency in it sent a shiver down his spine. Without thinking, he started running toward the sound. His boots pounded against the ground as he sprinted across the open field, dodging rocks and small patches of uneven terrain. His heart raced, not just from the exertion, but from worry. Whoever it was, they were clearly in trouble, and Ethan knew that in situations like this, every second counted. The creek could be dangerous. The water ran fast, especially in the spring when the snow melted in the mountains. As he neared the creek, the voice became clearer. "I'm begging you, hurry!" it cried again, higher and more desperate this time. Ethan's eyes scanned the area, searching through the trees and tall grass. That's when he saw him, a small boy, clinging to a broken branch that jutted out over the rushing water. The boy's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, and his hands shook as he tried to keep his balance. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had saved animals from dangerous situations many times, but this was different. This was a human life. Ethan took a deep breath and assessed the situation quickly. He knew he had to act carefully. One wrong move, and both of them could end up in the water. He spotted a sturdy tree nearby and grabbed a coil of rope from the back of his truck. He tied one end securely around the tree trunk, testing the knot twice to make sure it wouldn't slip. Then he inched closer to the edge of the creek, trying not to startle the boy. "It's okay," he called out, keeping his voice calm. "I've got you. Just hold on." The boy looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. Ethan could see the tears streaking his face, the dirt on his hands, and the way his small body trembled with cold and panic. The rushing water below glistened in the morning sunlight, moving faster than it appeared from a distance. Ethan's mind raced as he calculated every step, every movement he would need to make to reach the boy safely. He adjusted the rope, anchoring it around his waist, and inched closer, careful with every step on the wet, slippery rocks. Time seemed to stretch. Each second felt heavier than the last, filled with tension and uncertainty. Ethan kept talking to the boy, trying to reassure him, to keep him calm.
"You're going to be okay," he said firmly, though he didn't know for sure.
"Just hold on. Don't let go." The boy nodded, gripping the branch as tightly as he could. Ethan felt his own muscles strain as he leaned forward, reaching for the boy's hand. It was a moment of pure focus, the kind that made everything else disappear. The sound of the creek, the wind in the trees, even the sunlight above. There was only the boy and the rope and the fragile connection that could save a life. Ethan's heart pounded, adrenaline surging through him, but he stayed calm, steady, methodical, one careful movement at a time. The moment Ethan saw the boy clinging to the branch over the rushing creek, his heart leapt. Fear and concern surged through him, but he pushed them aside, focusing on what he had to do. He knew that hesitation could cost a life, and he wasn't about to let that happen. The boy's small frame trembled as the water roared beneath him, the current strong enough to sweep away even a grown man. Ethan could see the panic in the boy's eyes, the silent plea for help that spoke louder than any words. "Hold on," Ethan shouted again, trying to project calm and strength. "I'm coming to get you." He moved closer to the edge, carefully placing his boots on rocks that were slick with morning dew. Each step had to be deliberate, calculated, because one slip could send both of them into the cold, rushing water. He adjusted the rope tied around his waist and the sturdy tree trunk behind him, giving himself some security, though he knew the balance and courage he needed were mostly in his own hands. The boy's voice shook as he whispered, "Please, hurry." Ethan could see tears streaking the boy's dirt-covered face. His small hands clutched the branch as tightly as possible, but the wood cracked slightly under the pressure. Ethan's mind raced, thinking about how fragile everything was in that moment. He had spent years working with animals, handling unpredictable situations, but this was different. The boy was human, fragile, and full of fear. Every decision Ethan made mattered more than ever. He inched closer, his movements slow and precise. The rocks beneath his feet were uneven and slippery, and the water below reflected the morning sun in dazzling patterns. He focused on his breathing, steadying himself, even as his heart pounded. "I've got you," he called softly, wanting to calm the boy without startling him. "Just don't let go." The boy nodded. Though Ethan could see the fear in his eyes hadn't disappeared. Ethan scanned the area for something to help stabilize the boy. A long stick lay nearby, a broken branch from one of the trees. He grabbed it carefully, extending it toward the boy. "Take this," he said, holding it steady. "You can hold on with both hands, and I'll grab you from here." The boy hesitated for a moment, but the trust in Ethan's calm voice gave him the courage to reach for the branch. The moment the boy grasped the stick, Ethan moved a little closer, reaching out with one hand to touch the boy's arm. "You're doing great," he encouraged. "Just a little more and I'll have you." Sweat ran down Ethan's forehead, and his muscles ached from holding his balance on the slippery rocks, but he didn't let it distract him. Every ounce of focus went into this rescue. Suddenly, the branch the boy was holding shook and cracked under his weight. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Don't let go! I've got you!" he shouted, extending both hands now, ready to pull the boy to safety. The boy's legs kicked slightly in panic, and the branch threatened to give way entirely. Ethan's mind raced, calculating exactly how he could move without losing his own footing while also securing the boy. He remembered the rope tied to the tree and adjusted his grip on it, using it to anchor himself more securely. With a deep breath, he leaned forward as far as he dared, and finally got one hand around the boy's arm. "I've got you now," he said firmly. The boy's small body shivered, but he clung tightly to Ethan's hand. The current rushed beneath them, the water swirling around rocks and fallen branches, making a loud, frightening roar. Ethan felt the adrenaline surge through his body, his muscles straining as he pulled the boy closer. Step by careful step, he inched backward toward the safety of the creek bank. Every movement had to be precise. One slip, one wrong foot placement, and both of them could fall. But Ethan refused to panic. He had trained his body through years of ranch work and tough mornings like this, and now every lesson, every experience, mattered more than ever. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan managed to pull the boy fully onto solid ground. Both of them were trembling, but they were safe. The boy collapsed against the earth, gasping for breath, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. Ethan knelt beside him, brushing dirt and twigs from the boy's clothes. "You're okay now," he said gently. "You're safe." The boy looked up at him, tears still in his eyes, and whispered, thank you so much." Ethan smiled, trying to hide his own exhaustion. "It's okay. You're going to be fine. Let's get you somewhere warm and dry." He helped the boy to his feet and led him toward his truck, which was parked nearby. The boy's legs were weak, and he leaned heavily on Ethan as they walked. Ethan kept talking to him, calming his fears, asking questions in a gentle way to distract him from the trauma of the moment. Once they reached the truck, Ethan wrapped the boy in a thick coat he kept in the cab. The boy shivered violently, and Ethan held him close until the shivering slowed. He offered the boy some water and a granola bar from his truck, which the boy accepted quietly, still too overwhelmed to speak much. Ethan watched him carefully, making sure the boy's breathing returned to normal, and silently thanked whatever luck had guided him to arrive in time. As they drove slowly back toward the ranch house, Ethan kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the boy. He was exhausted, but there was a small spark of relief in his eyes. Ethan felt a mix of emotions himself, relief, pride, and a deep sense of connection to the small life he had saved. The creek, which had looked peaceful from a distance, had become a dangerous and unforgiving force up close. It reminded him how quickly life could change and how fragile it truly was. When they reached the house, Ethan led the boy inside and sat him by the fireplace, wrapping a warm blanket around his shoulders. The fire crackled, filling the room with comforting warmth and light. Ethan offered the boy something to eat and a chance to rest while he called the boy's parents. Soon the door opened, and a pair of frantic parents rushed in, their faces etched with fear and worry. When they saw their son safe and in Ethan's care, tears streamed down their faces. They hugged him tightly, thanking Ethan over and over. Ethan waved off their gratitude, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. He didn't need thanks. He had done what anyone would have done in his place. But seeing the relief and joy on the boy's parents' faces made the moment even more real. He knew that life could be fleeting, fragile, and unpredictable, but moments like this reminded him why courage and kindness mattered more than anything. Later, as the boy rested on the couch, Ethan stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp Montana air. The creek flowed calmly again, the morning sun sparkling on its surface. Everything seemed peaceful once more. But Ethan knew how close it had been to disaster. He realized that life had a way of testing people, of placing unexpected challenges in front of them, and that how one responded in those moments could define everything. For Ethan, this rescue had been more than just saving a boy from the water. It was a reminder of why he lived the life he did, connected to the land, aware of the rhythms of nature, and willing to act when others needed help. The boy, he knew, would never forget this day, and neither would he. It was a moment that would stay with both of them forever, a story of courage, calm, and the power of one person stepping up to save a life. After the rescue, the creek seemed calm again, as if nothing had happened, but Ethan knew better. Nature could be both gentle and unforgiving, and he had witnessed its unpredictable power up close that morning. He sat on the edge of the porch, still feeling the adrenaline slowly fade from his body. The boy, Samuel, had been brought inside and wrapped in warm blankets by the fire. His small frame trembled slightly, but the fear in his eyes was starting to ease. Ethan poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, staring into the flames and letting his thoughts wander. It was moments like this that reminded him why he loved the ranch. Life here was raw, real, and sometimes harsh, but it had its rewards. There was a rhythm to each day. The way the sun rose over the hills, the smell of fresh hay in the barn, the soft sounds of the cattle waking up. It was grounding, and today that grounding had given him the focus to act, to reach the boy before it was too late. He thought about the branch Samuel had clutched so tightly, the way it had threatened to break under his weight, and the pounding water beneath it. It could have ended very differently. Inside, Samuel was sitting on the couch, wrapped in blankets that were far too large for his small frame. He nibbled slowly on a granola bar, his wide eyes occasionally glancing toward the fireplace, as if it were a source of comfort and safety. Ethan kept checking on him, making sure he drank some water and didn't try to move too quickly. "You're safe now," Ethan said softly, crouching down to be at the boy's level. "Nothing is going to hurt you here." Samuel nodded quietly, still too shaken to speak much, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at his lips. Ethan sat beside him, letting the quiet settle around them. He could hear the faint crackle of the fire and the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. There was a peacefulness in this calm after the storm, and he welcomed it. "You're very brave," Ethan said gently. "Most kids your age wouldn't have held on like that." Samuel looked up at him, eyes wide with curiosity and a touch of pride. He whispered, "I didn't know what else to do." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. In moments of fear, people often do what they have to, even if they don't realize how strong they are. The ranch house was warm and smelled of coffee and freshly baked bread. Ethan had made breakfast earlier, thinking about the work that lay ahead on the ranch, but now it seemed far less important. He took a deep breath and tried to distract Samuel from the morning's terror. "Do you like animals?" he asked. Samuel's eyes lit up a little. "Yes," he said softly. "I love horses." Ethan smiled. "You'll love it here, then. We have a few that are very friendly. Maybe later, after you rest, you can meet them." Samuel's small smile grew slightly, a sign that he was starting to feel more at ease. After a few minutes, Samuel's parents arrived. They had been searching frantically for him, calling his name across the valley and through the trees. When they saw him safe, tears filled their eyes, and they rushed forward, hugging him tightly. Samuel's father's voice shook as he said, thank you so much for saving him." Ethan waved his hand, feeling slightly embarrassed by the gratitude. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly. But seeing the relief on their faces, he felt a warmth inside that went beyond pride. It was a quiet joy, knowing that life had been spared. The parents stayed for a while, making sure Samuel was calm and safe. Ethan offered them coffee and a place to sit. The house was small but cozy, filled with simple furniture and personal touches that made it feel like a home. The parents kept glancing at Samuel, checking that he was okay, and occasionally sharing small smiles with Ethan, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between the boy and his rescuer. Once Samuel and his parents left to return home, Ethan sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of emptiness where the tension had been. The morning had been intense, and though he had acted without hesitation, he realized how much energy it had taken to stay focused and calm. His hands still shook slightly from the adrenaline, and his mind replayed every step of the rescue. The creek, the branch, the rushing water, all of it had been vivid and real, a reminder that life was unpredictable and precious. Later that day, Ethan returned to his regular ranch work. He checked fences, fed the animals, and tended to the horses, but his mind kept drifting back to Samuel. He thought about how small gestures could make a huge difference, how a calm voice, a steady hand, and quick action had saved a life. The ranch had taught him patience, responsibility, and resilience, and he realized that those lessons had mattered more than ever today. As he moved through the fields, he noticed the subtle changes in the landscape, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the movement of the cattle as they grazed peacefully, and the gentle sway of the tall grass in the wind. Everything seemed normal, yet he knew that the day had changed him. He felt more aware of the fragility of life and the responsibility each person carried to act when others were in danger. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan sat on the porch once again, sipping coffee and watching the colors change in the sky. The world was quiet, almost too quiet, and he reflected on how quickly life could shift from calm to chaos. Samuel's fear had been palpable, and Ethan had felt it too, but he had acted with determination. The thought of what could have happened weighed on him, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the relief and gratitude he had witnessed. The ranch felt different now, somehow richer and more alive. It wasn't just a place to work or live. It was a place where lives could be saved, where courage could be tested, and where kindness could leave lasting impressions. Ethan felt proud of his role in that, but also humble. He had been in the right place at the right time, and the experience had reminded him of the importance of being ready for anything, no matter how routine a morning might seem. As night fell, Ethan walked through the barn, checking on the animals one last time. The horses stood quietly in their stalls, the cattle had settled into the fields, and the barn cats prowled softly in the shadows. Everything was in its place, yet the memory of Samuel clinging to that branch stayed with him. He thought about the boy's courage and how quickly fear could transform into relief. It was a powerful reminder of the resilience people could find within themselves when faced with danger. Finally, Ethan returned to the house, tired but satisfied. He made a small dinner for himself, sitting quietly and letting the events of the day sink in. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a calm sense of fulfillment. He knew that life on the ranch would continue, as it always did, with its routines, challenges, and moments of beauty. But today had been different. Today he had made a difference in someone else's life, and that knowledge stayed with him as he prepared for bed. As he lay down that night, Ethan thought about the boy, his small frame, and the courage he had shown. He thought about the creek, the branch, and the rushing water that could have ended everything in a single moment. He thought about the importance of being ready, of staying calm, and of acting with determination when it mattered most. And as sleep began to take him, he knew that this day would remain in his memory forever, not just as a story of danger, but as a story of hope, bravery, and the quiet power of a single act of courage. The next morning, the ranch seemed almost peaceful, but there was a quiet energy in the air, the kind that comes after something extraordinary has happened. Ethan rose early, as always, and stepped outside into the crisp Montana air. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, and the sun's rays touched the hills with a soft warmth. Birds chirped in the trees, and the gentle hum of the ranch animals filled the background. It was a familiar scene, yet everything felt different to Ethan. He moved more slowly this morning, letting the calm sink in after the storm of yesterday. Samuel had stayed the night at his home, but Ethan knew the boy's life had changed forever. Just thinking about the fear in his eyes, the trembling hands clutching the broken branch, and the small body shaking in the wind brought a wave of emotion. Ethan understood something deeply that day. Life was fragile, but courage existed even in the smallest of people. He had been lucky, too, to be in the right place at the right time, and that luck reminded him of how much responsibility each moment carried. Ethan began his morning chores with care, but he kept his mind partially on Samuel. As he walked through the barn, checking on the horses and feeding the animals, he thought about the boy's small frame and quiet bravery. He remembered the way Samuel had whispered, "Please, hurry," and how every word had been soaked in panic and fear. That moment had stayed with him, as if frozen in time, and Ethan realized that rescue was only part of the story. The other part was what came afterward, the healing, the trust, and the human connection that grew in unexpected ways. After finishing the chores, Ethan decided to take a walk toward the creek, the very place where the rescue had occurred. The morning light danced on the water, making it sparkle, but the current still held a quiet power. Ethan knelt by the edge, looking at the broken branch that Samuel had clung to. The memory of the boy's fear and desperation flashed vividly before his eyes, and Ethan felt a shiver run through him. He realized that small actions could make a huge difference, that courage could change lives, and that kindness could ripple far beyond a single moment. As he rose to leave, Ethan noticed the first signs of spring life awakening along the creek. Small flowers poked through the soil, and birds flitted from branch to branch. It was a reminder that life moved forward, even after moments of fear and danger. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, just as nature had a way of recovering and growing, humans did too. Samuel had been brave, but he had also been scared. It was a balance of vulnerability and courage that made the rescue meaningful. Later that day, Ethan received a call from Samuel's parents. They wanted to express their gratitude again, but also to ask if Samuel could visit the ranch to meet the animals. Ethan smiled and agreed. thinking that it might help the boy regain some confidence and bring a little joy after the frightening experience. By mid-morning, Samuel arrived with his parents. He walked cautiously, holding his father's hand, eyes wide as he took in the wide fields, the horses in the stalls, and the grazing cattle. Ethan greeted him warmly, kneeling to be at eye level. "Ready to see the horses?" he asked. Samuel nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through his lingering anxiety. Ethan led the boy to the stable, pointing out each horse and explaining a little about their personalities. Samuel listened attentively, asking questions and occasionally reaching out to pet the animals. His small hands gently stroked the soft coats, and his eyes lit up with wonder and excitement. Ethan watched him carefully, noticing how slowly the fear melted away as curiosity and joy replaced it. The experience was simple yet profound, a small step in helping Samuel feel safe again, and reminding him that the world could still be kind and beautiful. After spending time with the horses, Ethan showed Samuel the cows and sheep in the fields. They walked slowly along the pasture, Ethan pointing out details of ranch life, the way fences were mended, the care that went into feeding the animals, and how each creature had its own habits and personality. Samuel asked questions eagerly, and Ethan answered them with patience and kindness. He noticed that the boy's earlier panic had transformed into cautious confidence, and that growth felt deeply rewarding. By the afternoon, Ethan and Samuel had shared stories, laughed, and even worked together to repair a small section of fence. Samuel's parents watched from a distance, smiling and relieved to see their son feeling comfortable and engaged. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He understood that saving a life was only the beginning. The true reward came in nurturing recovery, building trust, and creating a safe space where courage could flourish. As the day drew on, Ethan led Samuel to a small hill overlooking the ranch. The view stretched for miles, with rolling hills, grazing cattle, and the winding creek shimmering in the sunlight. "See all this?" Ethan asked. "This is home. It's a place where people and animals live together, where life continues no matter what challenges come your way." Samuel nodded, taking in the vastness of the land, and for a moment he was quiet, reflecting on the morning's rescue and the afternoon's simple joys. Ethan felt that small connection, a bond forming silently between them, built on shared experience and trust. Later, they returned to the barn for a brief rest. Ethan handed Samuel a warm drink, and the boy sipped it slowly. "You know," Ethan said gently, "what you did yesterday, holding on like that, it was brave, very brave. And it's okay to be scared sometimes. That doesn't make you weak. It just means you're human." Samuel looked at him and smiled faintly, a smile full of understanding. Ethan knew that this was a moment that would stay with the boy for a long time, shaping how he approached fear and courage in the future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan felt a quiet peace. The ranch was calm, the animals were settled, and Samuel had found a little of the confidence he had lost. The day had been filled with simple activities, yet each one carried meaning, helping Samuel heal, showing him the beauty of life, and letting him experience a sense of safety and wonder. It was all part of the larger lesson of courage, resilience, and the importance of human connection. Ethan watched Samuel and his parents leave the ranch, the boy waving goodbye with a small, confident hand. Ethan waved back, a quiet smile on his face. He felt a sense of pride, not just for saving a life, but for helping a young boy discover strength, courage, and hope. He realized that moments like these were rare, yet powerful, and they could leave a lasting impact on both the person who was saved and the person who saved them. As night fell over the ranch, Ethan stood on the porch, sipping coffee and gazing at the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear Montana sky. The day had been long, but fulfilling. He reflected on what had happened: the fear, the bravery, the calm determination, and the small victories that had made a difference. He knew that life could change in an instant, but it was in those moments of change that courage and kindness mattered most. Finally, as he went inside to rest, Ethan felt a deep sense of connection to the land, the animals, and the people whose lives intersected with his. Samuel's bravery, the boy's parents' gratitude, and the quiet lessons of resilience and trust, they all became part of the story Ethan would carry with him forever. It was more than a rescue. It was a reminder that life, even in its simplest moments, was precious and worth protecting. Days passed since the morning Ethan had rescued Samuel from the rushing creek, but the memory of that moment stayed vividly in his mind. Even during his routine ranch work, feeding the animals, mending fences, checking on the horses, he found himself thinking about the boy. He thought about the courage Samuel had shown, the fear he had felt, and the quiet determination that had kept him clinging to that broken branch. Ethan knew that such experiences could leave a lasting impression on a young mind, shaping how Samuel would approach life and challenges in the future. Ethan decided to visit Samuel at his home one afternoon. The boy's parents had invited him, wanting him to see how Samuel was doing after the traumatic incident. When Ethan arrived, Samuel ran to the porch with a wide, bright smile. "Ethan!" he called, almost bursting with excitement. The fear in his voice from that day was gone, replaced by a mixture of curiosity, gratitude, and joy. Ethan smiled warmly, kneeling to meet the boy at eye level. "Hey, Samuel, how are you feeling today?" "I'm better," Samuel said proudly. "Thanks to you," Ethan chuckled softly. "It was teamwork," he said, though he knew that Samuel's bravery had been the key. "You held on and stayed strong. That's what made it possible for me to help." Samuel's eyes shone as he listened, and Ethan felt a deep satisfaction in seeing the boy regain his confidence. He knew that this small reassurance could help Samuel carry forward the lessons of courage and resilience for years to come. Samuel's parents joined them, offering Ethan tea and snacks. They were still grateful, still amazed at how quickly he had acted, but Ethan waved off their repeated thanks, insisting that anyone in his position would have done the same. Yet he understood that what mattered was not just the act of rescue, but the aftermath, the encouragement, the care, and the reassurance that life could be safe and joyful again. He spent a long afternoon with the family, sharing stories about ranch life, the animals, and his own childhood experiences. Samuel listened eagerly, asking questions about everything he saw. After a while, Ethan invited Samuel to visit the ranch again. "You'll get to ride the horses today," he promised. Samuel's face lit up at the thought, and he eagerly agreed. They spent the next several hours together, exploring the ranch, feeding the animals, and learning small ranch chores. With each passing hour, Ethan noticed how much Samuel's fear had diminished. The boy moved with confidence, laughed easily, and even offered to help Ethan with minor tasks. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that courage could grow, even after a frightening experience. As the sun began to set, painting the hills in shades of gold and orange, Ethan and Samuel sat together on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The view was breathtaking, the rolling hills stretching as far as the eye could see, the creek glistening in the fading light. Samuel leaned against Ethan, looking thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I was really scared that day. But now, I feel like I can do anything." Ethan smiled gently. placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "That's how courage works," he said. "It doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you face your fear and keep going anyway." The quiet moments stretched as they watched the sun disappear behind the hills. Ethan thought about how much he had learned from the experience, too. Saving Samuel had reminded him that life could change in an instant, that courage could appear in the smallest of people, and that kindness and action could leave a lasting mark. It was a reminder of what it meant to be human, vulnerable, brave, and capable of making a difference. In the weeks that followed, Samuel became a frequent visitor at the ranch. He helped with the animals, learned to ride horses, and gradually developed a sense of confidence and independence. Ethan enjoyed teaching him, sharing the knowledge he had acquired over decades of ranch life. But it wasn't just about chores or animal care. It was about building trust, nurturing courage, and showing Samuel that life could be filled with safety, joy, and adventure, even after moments of fear. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, Samuel paused and looked at Ethan seriously. "You saved my life," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if I'll ever forget it." Ethan knelt to meet the boy's gaze. "And I won't forget it either," he replied. "It was a special day for both of us, but remember, the bravery came from you." "I just helped you stay safe." Samuel nodded thoughtfully, understanding the truth in Ethan's words. It was a lesson about courage, responsibility, and the power of taking action in critical moments. As the seasons changed, so did the bond between Ethan and Samuel. They shared countless small adventures, feeding the animals, riding horses through open fields, and watching the sun set over the hills. Samuel's parents often stopped by, sharing updates and expressing gratitude. But Ethan always reminded them that he was just doing what anyone would have done. Yet deep inside, he knew that the experience had been transformative, not just for Samuel, but for himself as well. One evening, as they sat around a small fire on the ranch, Samuel asked Ethan a question that made him pause. "Do you think, if I ever face something scary again, I can be brave?" Ethan looked at him thoughtfully. "Absolutely," he said. "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about moving forward even when you are. And now that you've faced something really frightening, you know that courage is inside you. You just have to trust it." Samuel smiled, a smile full of confidence and understanding, and Ethan felt a quiet pride in the boy's growth. The creek, which had once seemed so dangerous, now looked calm and gentle, reflecting the soft light of the evening sky. Ethan knew that nature had its power and that life could always surprise you, but he also knew that people could rise to challenges, face their fears, and grow stronger. Samuel had learned that, and in turn, Ethan had been reminded of the quiet rewards of courage, kindness, and human connection. As the years passed, the memory of that morning never faded for either of them. Samuel grew into a confident young man, carrying the lessons of that day with him in everything he did. He remembered the fear, the rushing water, and the broken branch, but he also remembered the calm, steady hands that had guided him to safety and the quiet reassurance that courage and kindness could change everything. Ethan, too, reflected on the day often. It reminded him of why he lived the life he did, why he loved the ranch, and why he always stayed ready to act when needed. Life on the ranch was full of routine, hard work, and sometimes quiet solitude, but it was also full of moments where one could make a real difference. Saving Samuel had been one of those moments. It had left a permanent mark on both of their lives, a reminder that bravery, compassion, could create ripples that lasted a lifetime. On quiet evenings, Ethan would sit on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above the hills, and think about Samuel. He smiled, knowing that the boy was safe, confident, and ready to face whatever challenges came next. It was a peaceful, satisfying feeling, a sense of accomplishment and hope. He had acted when it mattered most, and the results were clear. A young life saved, a bond formed, and lessons learned that neither of them would ever forget. The ranch continued its rhythm, with horses galloping across open fields, cattle grazing calmly, and the creek flowing peacefully in the background. But for Ethan, it was more than just a place to live and work. It was a place where life, courage, and human connection had intersected in a profound way. The memory of Samuel, the morning of fear and bravery, and the long afternoons of healing and trust would remain a cornerstone of his life story. In the end, Ethan realized something important. Every day on the ranch, every moment spent caring for animals or repairing fences or simply walking the land was an opportunity. An opportunity to notice life, to act with courage, and to help others when they needed it most. Saving Samuel had been a dramatic moment, but the true reward was in the quiet lessons, the trust built, and the lasting impact it had on both of them. And so, the story of that morning, the rushing creek, the broken branch, and the small boy clinging to life, became more than just a memory. It became a symbol of courage, compassion, and the quiet heroism that exists in ordinary people. Ethan knew that the world was full of challenges, but he also knew that bravery could appear in the most unexpected ways, and that a single act of kindness could change the course of a life forever.